Transition Tuesday. We're talking about emergency preparedness today, whether or not. Are you prepared? So in Georgia, we had Hurricane Zeta come through this week, causing lots of power outages, downed trees, high winds. We were out of power for about a day, and a tree fell and pulled down a fence, and we're okay, but I thought it would be, now that the emergency has passed, that's the perfect time for you to plan for the next one. So the first place to start is to create a communication plan. A communication plan is about how and who you will contact first if something happens. In our case, it's our daughter in Michigan. She's out of state, she probably doesn't know what's going on, and we want her to know we're okay. Joe does not like wearing a hood, so he's like suffering right now, just FYI. And so your communication plan should include, for people in your home, family meeting place. If you are separated, if some of you work outside the home and something happens, a tornado or a really bad storm, what are some places in your community where you would get together to meet if you had to evacuate, or if a tree fell on the house, or if there was a medical emergency? Where will you meet? Especially if your phones and internet are down. Consider pets and family members with special needs. Obviously, that's why we're doing this. So once you have your communication plan and you kind of have an idea, even neighbors or friends can be included in this communication plan. I have a few friends who I just routinely check on when the weather is bad. I mean, we all sort of organically do this, but if you're intentional and you have a plan, it makes you feel a little more secure when things kind of do go awry. So, family emergency plan. So you know who you're going to communicate. Now, what are you going to do when you have to evacuate to the room in your house, the room that's in the center of the house in a storm, or down in the basement? What is your plan? Where are you going to go? What are you going to take with you? So you're going to create the plan when there's no emergency. Then you're going to practice that plan. And I know this seems crazy, but make a game out of it. Make it something fun to do on a rainy day, and then share it. Share it with other family members, neighbors, friends, the people in your communication plan. It's a good idea to do this. We've had a lot of practice with some of this stuff because sometimes Joe has medical emergencies. So we have bags. We have lots of bags. This is Joe's backpack that goes on the back of his chair. And in this backpack at all times, we have wipes. We have his rescue meds. We have a replacement Mickey button in case his button comes out. We have tools to fix his wheelchair in here, and it's see-through, so that's really helpful. Change of clothes, extra tube feeding supplies, and so this is his everyday bag. Then we have an emergency bag for if we have to evacuate or leave home very quickly. This is a list of doctors and prescriptions. There's actually a COVID sheet in here that I made. And also passwords and stuff, because you may not have your computer with you, but you may be able to access some things. So this is important. It's kind of scary to put all these things in a bag because you're thinking, ooh, what if I lose the bag? But it's an emergency. Medications. Now this one is tricky because, as you know, it's really hard to have a stored cache of medicines because of the expense of medications and restrictions. If you have medications like Joe does that have to be cool, then you need to make sure you always have ice and a cooler that the medications will fit in. And that is a real crisis situation for people. So that would not go in this bag, but you have to make sure you have a cooler. Change of clothes. You always have to have a change of clothes. And in the COVID world, hand sanitizer and some temporary face masks. So this would be if we have to leave the house really quickly. The other thing you need is, if you have medical equipment, Joe has a respiration vest, an airway treatment machine, and it's a vibration vest, and so that goes in this bag. So, you know, we really have to pack for an emergency. So you don't have to make this stuff up. You can go to, there's lots of websites. There's Ready Georgia is a really good one. Even if you don't live in Georgia, it's really good because it has lots of resources and PDFs that you can download with this information and like things that you can create a plan from. I know. You're doing so good with wearing that hood. So you can download the family emergency plan document, and there's tons of resources on that page, like what to do with your pets, because as you know, shelters do not allow you to bring pets with you. So if you have to evacuate to a shelter, have a plan for what is going to happen with your pet. And Georgia Ready, that website has information on how to plan for your pet. So we created an emergency supply kit. We have our emergency plan. And by the way, this is important for home disasters that have nothing to do with the weather. Home disasters like a fire or a flood. It's always good to have a plan. Most E911 centers in communities have like a little contact sheet that you can send back to them, where if you have somebody in your home who is on oxygen or is extremely fragile, E911 wants to know those things because when they get a call from your location or if there's a power outage, they have awareness about your particular emergency and they can plan ahead. They want to know, you know, who those critical people are. So it's really a good idea to call the non-emergency line and ask those questions. So you're going to have an evacuation plan. So that means that if you do have to leave the house, if you have a fire, if there is a tornado or a hurricane or some weather event, you know, it's kind of the same as the communication plan. Identify a place that you're going to go. The difference with an evacuation plan is you may want to have some different routes in mind, and always use the evacuation routes that they tell you to use, with the emergency management system, the broadcast system, or whatever you see on the website or, online, because you don't want to be stuck in a flood in your car with your child in a wheelchair. So always use those routes, but have evacuation routes going different directions, because you never know which roads are washed out. So you're going to plan your route. And then when you leave your house, leave a note. I know it's, maybe put it in a Ziploc bag, leave a note, and then unplug all your appliances and things, so you don't have a fire on top of everything else, and lock your doors and make sure that your pets you have a plan for your pets. I also wanted to mention that it's always a good idea to have, I'm looking on Joe's chair because we keep this on his chair at all times. Joe has a little, like a little packet that hangs on his wheelchair, and it contains his ID, and there's a little sheet with important medical information. And this is designed for any possible emergency that might happen, like, God forbid, we have a car accident or a medical event where I cannot communicate with emergency personnel. This is a really important thing to have if you live with somebody who's nonverbal, so that the crew can do what they need to do. I also have a flash drive in here, and this flash drive has all of his medication information, doctor information, which, by the way, I need to update, and so that they just have this. This is like a mini me. It can tell them anything they need to know about Joe if I am incapacitated. So this is a good thing to do. And there's all kinds of these that you can find online. They have bracelets, they have pendants, just kind of shop around and see. I like this because Joe had a bracelet, but it really didn't work very well for him, so this just lives on his chair. So you've created an emergency plan, you have a communication plan, you have materials to work with, you've got your bags packed, you've practiced, you've talked about what works and what doesn't work. Consider your neighbors. They're the front line, really, if something happens in your house. So maybe, I know some people don't live in really friendly neighborhoods, but just kind of connect with at least one neighbor, and for many reasons. If they're older or you worry about them, just tell them, hey, if anything ever happens, here's my cell phone number. Feel free to call me if something happens, or I may come to your house and check on you if something happens, so I just want you to be aware. Just kind of have a plan, because you may very well be transporting them if there's an evacuation as well, if things get really gnarly. And, that's just the right thing to do. So I want to tell you about a particular resource that is for people with disabilities. They have a really, really good Facebook page. It's called the Georgia Emergency Preparedness Coalition. It's a group of agencies that came together because they recognized that people with disabilities don't always have good access to resources. Like, For example, some shelters are not wheelchair accessible. So you would hate to go all the way to the shelter and then find out that we couldn't get Joe in there. And then what do we do? So you want to be able to have some resources for this ahead of time. And these folks have thought of everything. I noticed that they had like a little survey on COVID response. So they have things going on that page all the time, regardless of whether or not there's an emergency. Why? Because the best time to practice for an emergency is when you're not experiencing one. So we hope you'll do that. Joe, do you feel like you're ready for an emergency now? Tell me with your voice. Are you ready for an emergency? What do you think? I think we're ready. See you next time.